Scary telling. When I was in my early 20s, my date and I decided to go to the Sail Inn in West Sacramento to play pool. We had been there before and enjoyed speaking with the bartender. I can't recall her name, but she was a beautiful, engaging woman. This particular night, we walked in and noticed the pool table was occupied. There was a man and woman shooting a game, so my date bought us some drinks while I watched. After a few minutes, the man noticed me and struck up a conversation. When my date came over with our drinks, the man asked us if we wanted to play a game with them. It didn't occur to me at the time that his female companion hadn't yet said anything. We said yes, so he racked up the balls, and we played against them. During the game, we introduced ourselves, and right after, the man began asking me some personal questions that started to bother me, like where did I live, had my date and I been dating long, did we live together, etc. I noticed the man and his friend kept looking at each other. I became increasingly uncomfortable, even though the rest of the conversation was benign and pleasant in nature. Weirdly, the woman still hadn't said anything. When the game was over, the man asked us if we wanted to leave with them to go to another bar down the street. At first, I didn't say anything. The guy asked us again, saying they discovered a cool bar not too far from where we were. My date and I looked at each other, and before he could say anything, I blurted out, "No thanks, we have dinner plans." We, in fact, did not have plans, but my date didn't argue with me. I think he saw the look of panic on my face. We both grabbed our jackets and got the hell out of there. By the time we walked out the door, the hair was literally standing up on the back of my neck. When we got back to my truck, my date asked me what was wrong. I told him I got a horrible feeling from those people and just knew we had to get away from them. I told him it was weird that he asked us to leave with them when he didn't check with his date first. He shrugged and said okay. I think he thought I was crazy. A few days later, when I opened up the afternoon paper, there was an article in there about a woman from West Sacramento who had been found murdered. I didn't think anything of it until I got to the page where the article was continued, and the picture of the woman practically leapt off the page at me. It was the beautiful bartender from the Sail Inn. Apparently, she had been kidnapped, raped, and killed the very night I was there with my date. I was totally creeped out and thought what a crazy coincidence that was, and how sad it was that she had died so horribly. It wasn't until a month or so later that I realized why I had gotten so upset that night. A man and woman had just been arrested for the bartender's murder, along with the murders of several other people, four of whom were couples. There on the front page of the Sacramento Bee were the pictures of the killers, Gerald and Charlene Diego, the very couple who invited my date and me to go with them to another bar. And apparently, this was one of the ruses they used to get their victims into their van. My heart did flip-flops in my chest as I read the article. Not only have we been targeted as their next serial killer victims, but when we turned them down, they selected another target because of me. I have lived with both relief and guilt all my life because of this. Intellectually, I know it's not my fault the bartender died, but I've always wondered how different the world would have been had she been able to live out her life, even though I would have been gone myself. Needless to say, that was the end of my bar date experiences for a long, long time. Afterward, I just found out Charlene Diego has been living in Sacramento under an assumed name. Apparently, she was paroled there after serving her prison term. She has been making amends for her horrors by performing works of charity. Gerald Diego died in prison before he could be executed. I know good old Jerry got what he deserved, but I'm not sure how I feel about Charlene living as a free woman. She claimed on the stand to have been manipulated by Jerry, which is why she went along with the killing spree. Maybe that's why she never said anything in the bar. Perhaps she was under his complete control, so much so that she couldn't even speak in public. I would love to have a private chat with her. This is a story about a house on Willow Street that used to belong to a family of 6. The family was happy and well-to-do until one day, the father of the family was found dead in the bathroom. The death was ruled a suicide, but there were many rumors that it was actually a murder. The mother, devastated by the loss of her husband, moved the family out of the house and never returned. Years later, the house was still standing, but it had become abandoned and run down. It became a place where local teenagers would sneak in to party and explore, and there were many rumors of strange occurrences happening within its walls. But these were just rumors, right? One summer night, a group of teenagers decided to spend the night in the house. There were 5 of them, 3 boys and 2 girls. They arrived around midnight and made their way inside. The first few hours were uneventful. They explored the house, found some old belongings, and even managed to get the electricity working. They played games and told each other spooky stories. But as the night wore on, things started to get strange. One of the boys, Jack, claimed that he saw a figure in the shadows that moved like a person but was completely black. The others laughed it off, but Jack was clearly shaken. As the night progressed, they started to hear strange noises, like footsteps coming from the upper floors. The girls were convinced that there was someone or something else in the house with them. They wanted to leave, but the boys thought it would be fun to keep exploring. Then, they heard a sound like someone knocking on a door. It was coming from the master bedroom. They crept down the hallway and into the room. They saw nothing at first, but then a pale hand shot out from under the bed and grabbed one of the girls by the ankle. She screamed, and the boys pulled her free, but she was clearly traumatized. They decided to leave the house, but as they were making their way to the door, they saw something that made their blood run cold. A ghostly figure, a man who looked like the father who had died years before, appeared before them. He pointed an accusing finger at the boys and then disappeared. The group raced out of the house and into the night, but when they reached the street, they realized that something wasn't right. The houses all looked different, and the street signs were unfamiliar. They were lost, and they couldn't find their way back to their own neighborhood. As they wandered through the unfamiliar streets, they realized that the ghostly figure they had seen in the house was following them. They could hear his footsteps, and sometimes they could even see his outline in the darkness. They ran as fast as they could, but the figure never seemed to tire. Hours later, just before dawn, they stumbled across a police car parked by the side of the road. They were taken back to the station, where they told the police what had happened. The officers listened with skeptical expressions on their faces, but they agreed to take the group back to the house on Willow Street to investigate. When they arrived, they found the house completely empty. There was no sign of the ghostly figure or any other presence in the house. The teenagers were questioned for hours, but there was nothing to prove that they had been there at all. It was as if their entire night had been a dream. But they knew that it hadn't been a dream. They knew that they had come face to face with a ghostly presence in that house. And even though they never spoke of it again, they knew that the house on Willow Street was a place that they would never forget. Years passed, and the group of teenagers grew up and went their separate ways. But the memories of that terrifying night never left them. They would sometimes have nightmares about the ghostly figure following them, and they would always wake up in a cold sweat. One day, the news of the demolition of the house on Willow Street reached them. The city had decided to tear down the abandoned house, and it would soon be gone forever. The group decided to go back to the house one last time before it was demolished. As they stood in front of the house, memories of that terrifying night flooded back. They could still feel the fear and terror they had experienced. As they stood there, they noticed something strange. A figure, a pale, ghostly figure that looked like the father of the family who had died years before, appeared in front of them. The figure pointed an accusing finger at the group and then disappeared. The group ran as fast as they could, away from the house. They knew that the ghostly figure was still there, haunting the house even after all these years. They never went back to the house on Willow Street again. But even now, many years later, the members of that group still have nightmares about the ghostly figure and the house on Willow Street. They never forgot that terrifying night and the ghost that haunted the house, and they always warned others to stay away from the cursed place. It was a cold, dark night in the middle of winter. A young couple, Anna and Mark, were enjoying a quiet evening at home, curled up on the couch watching a movie. As the night wore on, they decided it was time for bed and headed upstairs. As they were getting ready for bed, they heard a strange noise coming from downstairs. It sounded like someone was moving around in the living room. They assumed it was just the cat and went to investigate, but when they got downstairs, they found the living room completely empty. Shrugging it off, they returned to bed, but the noise continued. It sounded like someone was walking around in the hallway outside their bedroom. Mark decided to investigate, but when he opened the bedroom door, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Standing in the hallway was a figure, a tall, shadowy figure that seemed to be made of smoke. It had glowing red eyes that seemed to bore into Mark's soul. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. Anna, sensing something was wrong, got up and saw the figure too. They both backed away into the bedroom, locking the door behind them. For the next hour, they sat huddled together on the bed, listening to the strange noises coming from the hallway. It sounded like someone was scratching at the door, trying to get in. The figure outside seemed to be taunting them, playing with them, and they didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the scratching stopped, and everything fell silent. Anna and Mark thought it was over, but then they heard a voice, a low, rasping voice that whispered through the door, "You didn't invite me in." They realized with horror that the figure was not just some random presence, but an uninvited guest. They had inadvertently let it into their home by not properly inviting it in. They knew they had to do something, but they didn't know what. Frantically, they searched online for ways to banish evil spirits, and they found a ritual that involved burning sage and reciting a specific incantation. They ran to the store and bought sage, and when they returned home, they immediately set to work. They lit the sage and recited the incantation, and as they did, the figure in the hallway started to fade away. The red eyes disappeared, and the scratching stopped. The couple collapsed onto the bed, exhausted but relieved that the uninvited guest had finally left. The next day, they went to see a psychic, hoping to get some answers about what had happened. The psychic told them that the figure they had encountered was an evil spirit that had been attracted to their home because of some negative energy that had been lingering there. The couple had unwittingly let it in, but they had also managed to banish it with the ritual they had performed. From that day on, Anna and Mark were more careful about inviting positive energy into their home. They learned that there were things beyond their understanding and control, but that they could take steps to protect themselves from them. The memory of the uninvited guest would stay with them for a long time, but they knew that they were now better equipped to deal with any future encounters with the paranormal.